What up, Marsh Pod? Special third edition of the week. James Canton is on vacation, so filling in for the athletic colleague on his article this week. This pod's coming at you with a guest host, Professor Moody. That's what's up. All right, good episode coming up. Talking the crazy week of upsets and why maybe Bay Area's fourth quarter troubles are not as they seem. We're recording this 7 o'clock Friday afternoon, so about to tip off Southeast Select and Latin America. And depending on how that goes and the fact that Beasts of the East plays here tomorrow against AT Aliens at noon, we've had a number of upsets this week. There's not a top team that has avoided the upset bug this week, right? Every single division leader except for Beasts of the East has suffered a loss to a team that we wouldn't have expected. So first and foremost, I think that's going to draw your attention, as it should. But this is terrible take radio culture, but we should look at this with two perspectives. One, this is going to mean one of two things. Hot take. One, this is going to be the top teams, the delta between the top and the middle teams is not as big as we think. Right? We've talked about how each team that leads has a head-scratching loss, and that at every level of sports is going to be true. There's going to be head-scratching losses by top teams in every sport. We're now coming up on head-scratching loss number 2, and normally that's not that big of a deal. If you look at the NBA, 82-game season, you're going to get some head-scratching losses. The Houston Rockets are going to beat the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics are going to then lose to another bad team. I mean, the Golden State Warriors, by the time this comes out, they won't have tipped yet, but the Golden State Warriors are a team that, lost to Orlando, Detroit twice, and they're 2 wins from the Western Conference Finals. So those types of things exist, those bad stretches, and I think that's where we're at, is that this isn't an indication that the bad teams and the good teams are actually much closer together, but in fact, I think this is going to be the week we remember as just, wow, this went crazy, and okay, moving on. We've seen a larger track record from every single top team that they believe and they belong to be at the top. And 1 week shouldn't change that. What's fascinating, what's intriguing is that it's literally happening the week of May 7th, May 8th. Like, that's interesting. Normally we see it played out over a larger period, but maybe that's it. It's just interesting. And by the time this all boils down, it's not that Africa or Indy or Yacht Club were completely on the same level as teams like the Originators or Bay Area, but rather that, just lost. That being said, I actually really like Yacht Club and what their future is going to look like now that they have Adam Max in. They have played exceptionally well. They're 7-6, 2 straight wins. They've looked great in those 2 wins. And heck, they could struggle against APAC, but I think they should get that win. But there's a really large group in the middle class, right? We know who the top teams are, but there's a massive group in the middle class between what is Gotham 5 going to look like, but they're 7-6. Run DMV's 7-6. Atlantis is 6-7. Lakeshore Drive Beyond the Arc are 7-8. Europe, Reigning Trays are both 7-7. Yacht Club 7-6. AT Aliens, Queen City, Gulf Coast Lockdown all 7-8. Those are all the teams that are 500 or a game within it. Showtime's not; they're 2. But that's a huge group of teams. I think Yacht Club has a very real chance of coming out of that group and being something legitimate. Now, we're looking at a 30-game season. We're closing in on game 15. Yacht Club is not far out. They're 3 games back of the H-Town Hoopers. in a league that we're going to take the top 8 teams, right? So in the Legend Conference, I'm just kind of setting the stage of just where they sit before we even talk about their on-court. You've got Best Coast, Bay Area, Showtime, that's 3, Lone Star Southeast, that's 5, and H-Town, that's 6. Those are the 6 teams that had not in order, obviously. So Yacht Club's coming in as number 7. And within their own division, they've got a 2.5 game edge on Latin America. They've got a 1 game edge over all of AT Aliens, Queen City Kings, and Gulf Coast. And they've got a 2 game lead over APAC and Oceania. They're sitting in a really good spot, and I think there's a chance for them to jump up even further. Adam Max has completely changed this team. Now, I know I talked about this is an opening of a can of worms, potentially. That wasn't specific to Adam Max, and I don't think that I called them out specifically. I think Adam Max, if he's turned the corner, this is great. But if he has indeed turned the corner, and this is them in the long run, with what we've seen from Jay Laster, who's been incredible all season, from what we've seen from Dominic Bianco again, Trey Willis is a nice addition there. They've got a really good top-end group that should be considered very concerning from a opponent standpoint. Not to mention their schedule is going to tell us a lot over the next 4 games. Their next 4 games starting tomorrow to round out the month of May. All of them home. APAC, team they should be able to beat. Then Showtime, Best Coast, and I'll add a 4th game to you. That's 3. Bay Area on the road June 6th. Those last 3, Showtime, Best Coast, Bay Area, are massive. Doesn't get much easier. They get an Oceania, then a Run DMV who's been playing well, Beasts of the East, Gotham 5. They have a stretch right now that's difficult. If they come out of that, just like we talked about with Beasts of the East on a previous pod, if they come out of this gauntlet with a lot of wins, they should be obviously very concerning. And if I'm anybody, and I saw what they did to Lone Star, I saw what they did to AT Aliens, I'm looking at this Queen City, or this Yacht Club team, because they lost to Queen City. I'm looking at this Yacht Club team, and I'm saying, that's got danger potential to it. 3 levels of scoring. Bianco can get every 3 level. Laster has gotten every 3 level. Said it on the broadcast with Siege. This is a team that went from having no size without Adam Max, with the additions that they made of Graham and then Guzman already being there. Now they might be one of the bigger teams in a heartbeat. So credit to Coach Marcus Laster for not only the whatever type of conversation that he had with Adam Max to get that situation turned around, but he started to add pieces that make sense, that he specifically targeted, what are my weaknesses? We got to get better at him. He's done that. It's a tiny sample size. It's the not the smallest, but the second smallest of small size sample theater. Small sample size theater, 2 games. But those 2 games weren't nothing. Blowout and a win over a team that's been considered one of the best in the league. Granted, in a week that we've already said maybe we don't take those wins and losses seriously, I think the Yacht Club might be the one that does. All right, last one to close out your Friday night. I've talked about Bay Area's inability to close out games, and this is a perfect one. This comes on the heels of their 5th loss of the season, a blowout loss to Run DMV. But I was curious. I went through every single game that they played, and these numbers that you're going to get first do not include the Run DMV game. But I said, here's the hypothesis. They are not a good 4th quarter team, and they lose in the 4th quarter. That's the hypothesis. My belief is that. Here's their total scoring per quarter breakdown. In the first quarter, they have scored 236 points. They have allowed 241. They're -5 in the first quarter. In the second quarter, they have scored 225 points, given up 231. They're -6 in the second quarter. In the third quarter, they've scored 242 points. They've given up 215. We're doing math on the fly. That's 27. They're plus 27 in the third quarter. Check me if I'm wrong, because I very well may be. We're not using a calculator. Just like the teacher said, you wouldn't have it at all times. Fourth quarter, they've scored 242. they've given up 235. So they're plus 7 in the fourth quarter. So that was my first kind of hypothesis. This is a team that doesn't know how to close games. Okay? Well, then I want to see, okay, how many times have they won when they've entered the fourth quarter? In 8 games in which they've led the game entering the fourth quarter, Bay Area is 7-1. You want to talk about being able to close out games? They can close out games. Now, that also means that because their record, of course, is 9-5, they are 2-4 in games in which they enter not leading entering the fourth quarter, which, truthfully, probably what should be the case. So then I wanted to look at their 5 losses. What kind of decided it? They lost to Showtime early on. They lost by 6 to Showtime. They were minus 11 in the second quarter. So they got beaten in the second quarter, hung with them the rest of the way, couldn't make the comeback all the way. That means they were plus 5 in the other 3. Southeast Select, the game they lost by 13, they were minus 17 in the first quarter, plus 4 in the other 3. Beasts of the East, they were minus 11 in the fourth quarter of a game they lost by 10. It's the one time they lost entering the fourth quarter. That's loss number 3. Loss number 4, this is the only game, and that's 1 of 2, I take that back. But actually, no, I don't. This is the only game in which they lost every quarter. They lost by 8 in the first. That was the worst. But they lost every quarter. That's the only game in which they didn't lead in the other 3 quarters that they lost, except for their loss to Run DMV. They were minus 8 in the second, but in a game that they lost by 16, they were minus 16 in the third quarter. So what does all this tell us? This tells us that it's not a matter, Bay Area, of not being able to close out games. In fact, they're about an average team when it comes to closing out games in a competitive balance. Even that's not true. They just get beat in one quarter. The issue that Bay Area has, I think I said Run DMV last time, the issue that Bay Area has is not that they don't know how to close games. It's that in the 5 times they've lost, they've been 4 of those times unable to play full 4 quarters, and only 1 of them came in the 4th with the loss to Beasts. Otherwise, it's early in the game or earlier in the game that they get beaten and can't make their way back despite winning at least 2, if not 3 of the other quarters. So, hypothesis, Bay Area doesn't know how to close. We run our little scientific experiment, and the outcome is, it's not they don't know how to close, it's that when they lose, they haven't been able to string together 4 quarters. It means they're a really good basketball team. They've been playing well. Even the loss to Run DMV, you can chalk it up to a bad third quarter. So long as they put together 4 quarters, and they don't get beat by double figures in one of them, chances are Bay Area is going to win. I'm not saying that makes them better than everybody else, but it means my personal statement that this is a team that doesn't know how to close, it just isn't true. Have a great weekend.